bringing you a conference on presidential tapes. It was held in February at the JFK Library in Boston. Some of the topics covered during this two-day forum included access to tapes, famous taping gaps, and insights on the presidents. This first panel examines the history of the taping system.
I guess it's particularly appropriate to have this at the Kennedy Library. As the older folks in our audience will recall, Washington faced an extraordinary blizzard the night before President Kennedy's inauguration. Going to the inaugural gala, President Kennedy's car had to crawl along so slowly that people who were digging their own cars out of snowdrifts sort of noticed that the president was coming by, knocked on the windows, and President Kennedy told the driver to turn the lights on in the car so the folks could see Jackie. When they got to Constitution Hall for the pre-inaugural concert, most of the seats were empty because folks couldn't get there. But that inauguration turned out pretty darn well, and so will this. Just expect a little bit of improvisation. Anyway, welcome to Boston. You're right near Walden Pond, where Henry David Thoreau lived. And among my favorite words from Thoreau are these: "It takes two to speak the truth, one to speak and another to hear." For years, the truth has been spoken in the Oval Office, at least from time to time, but until it could be heard, it was not always known. And that's what makes presidential tapes so special. For the first time, we know for certain what was going on. We can hear the truth, and we will hear and learn it together over the next 2 days from the people who were with the presidents, from their families, from historians, from journalists, and from archivists. A few ground rules. We won't be giving extensive biographies of speakers during the introductions. We'd rather spend the time on other content, so please refer to your programs for that. And we'll also be looking for audience questions. To allow everyone a chance to participate, please keep them short, and please approach one of the two microphones up front so everyone can hear you. Okay, it's our time to eavesdrop on history, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the Archivist of the United States, John Carlin.
Thank you, Deborah, and good afternoon to all of you. It's my pleasure to add my welcome to all of you who are here in the audience as well as those watching us on television. The National Archives is pleased to be a part of this. Obviously, the libraries are a critical part of our operation, along with our main facilities, military personnel records in St. Louis, regional facilities all over the country. We're very proud to join Deborah and the other libraries in making this possible. I'd like to just reinforce a little bit about the process. We're going to try to make this very conversational. So after we're well into it, if you start getting the itch to ask a question, I'll be ready to recognize you. We would urge that you ask questions. We're not looking for statements from the floor. We have panelists here to do the answering of questions and welcome the opportunity to respond. I would like to just simply mention my panelists today. From my left to right, your right to left, Claudia Anderson is an archivist with the LBJ Library. Alexander Butterfield, former Nixon staff member. Jim Cannon here, who was in the administration of President Ford. Sheldon Stern, who was, until not too long ago, a historian for the Kennedy Library. Martin Teasley, who is deputy director at the Eisenhower Library. And Ray Teichman, an archivist at FDR Library. I thought we would begin today in many ways where it all started, from the public's point of view, not with FDR, but with Mr. Butterfield and his presence at a hearing. And Mr. Butterfield, I'd like to ask, and then you may have some comments you'd like to share in terms of, I think of all of us up here, more people would like to know more specifically what you did in the White House. But what I'd like to ask you is, when did it dawn on you that you might play a very key role in history?
Well, that never did dawn on me, as a matter of fact. I've always characterized my role as peripheral, and I certainly believe that. It was a very small thing that I did, bringing these tapes to light. I simply answered a question. But I was, to answer that first question, Bob Haldeman was our, what they call now, White House Chief of Staff. But we did not have that term then. He was never, ever called or referred to as White House Chief of Staff. And I was his only deputy. And I did occupy that office immediately to the west of the Oval Office, that adjoined the Oval Office. And I was simply asked one day to put in a taping system. And I didn't get any particulars, so I talked to Haldeman later. I was asked by Haldeman's staff assistant, Larry Higbee. And so I talked to Haldeman later in the day and learned more, and he said, yes, we want a taping system put in. Make it good so that, you know, and elaborate, and don't have the military do it. Haldeman viewed the military with some disdain, some considerable disdain, and he felt that they wouldn't do a good job. Plus the fact that the military do get transferred from time to time, and it was deemed, you know, more secure if you had the Secret Service. So to conclude, we had the Technical Security Division of the Secret Service, and no other Secret Service people knew about this installation. But the Technical Security Division installed the tapes, and we were off and running. And I had no idea that this would be a red letter day or a black day in history or any of those things.
Well, now, I was always told that the quality of the tape that was purchased to use was from across the street and not exactly high quality. Is there a truth to that, or do you feel that the system was set up from the very beginning to be high quality and using the best?
Well, we asked that the quality be high, and I made 2 spot checks during the 2-year period that I was in the White House following the installation. Incidentally, the installation of the Nixon tapes came roughly midway in the first term. So, you know, it was February of '71, and we were in the White House from January of '69. So I checked them twice, and the quality was very good. I could understand everything. But they put the initial microphones in the president's desk. So that came back to bite us, because when coffee was served at the desk, which was the normal routine, you could hear the coffee cups rattle, and the president's knee would kick the desk, or he would put his feet up now and then, probably right on a microphone. There were 6 microphones embedded in the surface of the desk.
It was a voice-activated system, was it not?
Oh, yes, it was voice-activated. Yes.
So the cleaning lady got her share of time.
No, I don't want to belabor this because it's somewhat technical, and I'm not a technical person, but it was voice-activated only when the president was in the Oval Office. And the president, the way the Secret Service knew that the president was in the Oval Office is by a locator box. And there were a few of us, about 5 of us, that had locator boxes that had to know where the president was from minute to minute. I was one. Steve Bull, who was a staff assistant on the other side of the Oval Office, was another. Haldeman was a 3rd. Rosemary Woods a 4th. And I can't think who else. Possibly Dwight Chapin, the appointment secretary. And this box looked similar to these cards, about 14 inches long, and there were little windows in it, 7 little windows. One said barber shop, for instance. One said out, meaning the president was out, away from the White House complex. One said Oval Office. One said Executive Office Building, Camp David, that type of thing. When the president was in the Oval Office, the Secret Service knew that. They have little things in the wall, and when the president moves, they open the cabinet in the wall and let that information be known to the White House Situation Room, which is sort of under the Oval Office, under the cabinet room, actually. And they'd say, the president's going to the EOB office, or the president's now in the Oval Office. And these guys flicked the light so when the light was on for Oval Office, this thing was operating. So no one was
Cleaning lady turned it on herself because she... I'm just talking about a lot of tape we got that isn't that much use. Let's go back to the beginning, though. Ray, what can you tell us? As far as we know, Roosevelt was the first administration to use this way of recording history. What can you tell us about why it was set up and what was it used for?
Well, FDR, I think, as in the case of a lot of presidents, realized he was misquoted from time to time. And one particular instance happened in January of '39. He had a meeting with the Senate Military Affairs Committee, and where they talked a great deal about foreign relations and about the defense of the country in Europe and Asia and so on. And as it turned out, FDR had a stenographer on the staff, and his press conferences and a lot of his speeches were shorthand notes were taken. And there was shorthand taken of this particular meeting, about 27 pages as it was typed out. And a term that the newspapers quoted after he had the meeting was that the defense of the United States was on the Rhine, meaning the Rhine River. And FDR was asked about this at the press conference, and he said, no. He said, that's a deliberate lie. I never said that. And he didn't. And so his staff decided that, suggested the idea that perhaps some kind of a recording machinery could be found to verify exactly what he was saying at some of these sensitive meetings. And that seems to have been the impetus. And it was his staff, particularly his chief stenographer, a man named Henry Kenney, who was responsible for locating this particular machine, which was a sound-on-film machine. It literally used the old 35 millimeter motion picture film. It didn't have any emulsion on it. Didn't have any sprockets. It was designed to be a voice-activated system as well, and also a system that could replay very quickly. It was developed by a man named Keel, Joseph Ripley Keel, and he himself was an inventor. He was not a marketer, and he eventually turned it over to RCA to develop and market. And we understand that the idea came through Kenney, but also as a result of David Sarnoff, who of course was the head of NBC, who met with FDR sometime in June of 1940. The machine itself was actually installed in August of 1940.
Was it a deep, dark secret, or was it?
At the time, it was a secret. Yes, it was not something that was known. The only microphone that the machine had was in a lamp that was on the White House desk, and that's why, of course, FDR's voice comes through much clearer than most of the others. It was used exclusively for press conferences. This was the idea. The conversations that were picked up as a result of this were inadvertent. The machine was left on. It was left in what was called an idle phase, which would make it voice activated. If no one was talking, no one was in the room, the machine wouldn't operate. But as soon as someone started to talk, or if FDR was writing at the desk, you could hear an awful lot of pen scratches when he's just writing things or signing his name.
Chronologically, Truman should be next, but it's best of our knowledge, although there was a little bit of taping, hardly any survived, so there's not much to discuss or talk about. Martin, the Eisenhower administration introduced a new technology.